Okay. Introduction to Versailles. Before you watch this, you should definitely read the short Khan Academy article about Versailles. Don't worry about how many buttons he had. There all that information is there to kind of emphasize how it kind of excessive, especially Louis the XVI, but also the 14th court was. Of course, all of this eventually leads up to the French Revolution, right? So we have the Palace of Versailles. We have two different architects who are associated with it. Laval began it, and Hardouin Mansart, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that because my French stinks, is the other major architect. Um, the building, well, the whole complex is Versailles, the building and the gardens, and so that's what we think about when we talk about Versailles. We're talking about not just the buildings, but also the gardens, which, as you can see from here from the identification information, are considered a major part of this piece. And there will be specific information about the gardens that you'll need to know. So the site actually started not as a massive palace. That was never the intention from the original, but started under Louis the 16th as a hunting, sorry, the 13th, Louis the 13th, as a hunting lodge. But eventually, obviously, it was redone and expanded into the massive complex that it is today. A hunting lodge to get away from the city, because this is about, oh gosh, I want to say 20 miles. I'm sure I'm wrong about that. It's a little bit outside of the city of Paris, which, of course, in the 17th century and into the 18th century is going to be a super dirty place, right? And crowded, and so was kind of a developed as Versailles as a way for the royalty and certain nobility to escape Paris, which, of course, removed them from the troubles of the city, which, of course, led to their downfall. I mentioned the two major stages, the two major architects already. It is ultimately a symbol of the power of the king, beginning with Louis the 14th, and then Louis 15th and Louis 16th. So the three kings who live there, in this version of it, not the hunting lodge, are Louis the 14th, Louis the 15th, and Louis the 16th, all one right after the other. The saying is, Louis the 14th built it, Louis the 15th lived in it, and Louis the 16th paid for it, because, of course, he ends up decapitated. And it also sits, so in terms of placement, it's on the crest of a hill, which makes it seem even larger. And it is built on an east-west axis. That is important, because what goes east-west, right? The sun does. Why is that important? Because Louis the 14th is known as the Sun King. He over and over again is conflated, not conflated, but kind of connected to the god Apollo. Again, they're not worshiping Apollo, but they're reusing all of those. So even past the Renaissance, because we're not really in the Renaissance anymore, we're in the 17th century. So even the interest in the Greek gods remains. So we'll see some more of that. If you've ever been to Versailles, and I've only been once, but if you go, you can understand why the people revolted. It is massive, and I think probably pretty upsetting. Some people love it. I find it horrifying personally. I would go back again, but I find it amazing and horrifying at the same time. So this video, which you will watch when you go through the presentation, you should watch on your own. It's in French, but there are English subtitles. It is required, but it's under 3 minutes. So this is about Louis the 14th, again, who built Versailles, not the hunting lodge, because the hunting lodge totally went away. Versailles, right? So here we go. We're not watching that. You're watching it on your own. I'm moving on to the next slide. Okay, this is also another video not required. The other video was required, not required, of a trailer to Sofia Coppola's movie Marie Antoinette. I don't remember what year it came out. 2000 something. I don't remember. Totally not required, but it's a fun little trailer that's kind of, and with some fun music, and you get to look at some of the crazy costumes and the wigs. But you know, if you're interested, you can watch it. It is not required though, but it is fun. I recommend it. This is a UNESCO video. UNESCO from the United Nations, right? The World Heritage Sites. Versailles is a World Heritage Site. UNESCO videos are incredibly boring. They have very boring narrators. I think they have to be, because they can't be super exciting, because they need to be kind of neutral sounding. This is a required video. It's about 2.5 minutes. So let's look at some exterior stuff. And so you already know this if you read the Khan Academy article. And if you haven't read the Khan Academy article, read that first before you continue listening to this. So we can see the exterior. What do I see? I see a lot of arches. I see columns, right? I see things and tablatures. I see things that remind me of classical Rome, right? And so, of course, then that is which is something that also gets adopted during Renaissance. Again, this is we are no longer in the Renaissance, right? We are in the 17th century. So not in the Renaissance anymore. So that kind of emphasis on the classical style remains, right? But if you look at it carefully, you're like, this doesn't look anything like any of the other buildings that I saw during the Renaissance, because it is a bit, not just because of the size of it, because it's massive, but also because it just seems to be a little extra, right? And so that's how you can tell that it is, yes, it's classical on the outside, but it's got a little bit of extra ornament, I guess you might say. It doesn't look like a Renaissance building, but although the ties to classical buildings are very clear there. So the building is all about power and authority. I already mentioned that the power and authority of the king, beginning with Louis XIV, excuse me. It is more than a quarter mile long. It is huge. And in terms of the exterior, we have a lot of symmetry happening. Lots of verticals and horizontals that are very are balanced very evenly. And so what does that emphasize? That emphasizes a control and stability, because remember, this whole thing is a symbol of the king. So we have this classical restraint, even though it's got a little bit of extra, right? Classical restraint on the exterior. The exterior also has this kind of regular spacing. We see that these arched windows are spaced very regularly, you know, and the other elements are spaced very regularly. This building obviously goes further to the right, and it would be the same series of 4 columns further down, right? This being the center of it, which emphasizes the order and the discipline, which of course are things that you want to associate with the king, even though I wouldn't exactly call Louis XIV a very disciplined person. Again, connection to Greece and Rome, right? Now that's the outside. The inside is a different story. The inside looks far more Baroque, because I know we're in the Baroque period, so this doesn't look super Baroque to me, even though it's got some extra ornament stuff happening. It doesn't look very Baroque, but you have to see the interior. The interior is something else. So this video is required, and it gives you some good views of some exteriors, specifically the Hall of Mirrors, which is our major interior space that we're going to look at. You know, the function of the building obviously changes after the revolution. You know, you don't have kings living in there, although you do have some people in power living in there at different points in time. It's now obviously a museum. It is required. It is about 7 minutes. So let's look at some more of the facade. Here we have, we've got a guy, a face, and some sun rays. So a reference to Louis XIV / Apollo here. Look at all the gold. There is gold everywhere. Everywhere. So again, I want to kind of emphasize those classical elements that you see, right? But then you're like, oh, it looks not just a little classical. It's not entirely classical and refined looking. It has some, it goes beyond that. So here's the Hall of Mirrors. Look at that interior. It's huge. It's extremely long. I should know the length. I don't. The ceilings are covered in not frescoes, but in painting, in oil paints on curved canvases, as I recall. They could be wood. But look at all of this ornament and decoration. And, this is nothing like what we've seen before. There is so much happening here visually. And so this is what we talk about when we talk about Baroque, secular Baroque in particular. It is not to my taste, but wait till you get to Rococo. If you're not liking this, you really won't like Rococo. I don't care for this personally, but it's just a matter of taste. So we have the Hall of Mirrors. The windows are on one side overlooking the gardens. The mirrors are here. I'll get to that in a moment. It is so lots of like processions and the king from moving from one side of the palace to the other happen here. A lot of important events would happen here as well. Okay, so again, another shot of the Hall of Mirrors. You understand why maybe why there was a revolution. Yes. Okay. So here we have it. It's astonishing. It's too much for me. So look at all that gold, right? It is a tribute to the political, economic, and artistic success of France. How do I mean, right? It's got these oil paintings on the ceiling, on this barrel vaulted ceiling, which depict the history of Louis XIV. It's got many, many, many mirrors on these, on this wall. Why is that a big deal? Mirrors are extremely expensive. And the Venetians were the ones who were at this point like the kings of mirrors, but the French are showing that they can rival that. And then also artistic, they come up. There's definitely a very particular French style here. We've got these limestone pillars. I'll show you in just a moment. There's one right here. And these gilded bronze, with national emblems. Here's what I'm talking about. So the red limestone pillars, these are so they're not exactly, they're pilasters. So we see the rooster symbol. We see a Louis XIV / Apollo looking guy here. So this is nothing like you've seen before in terms of a capital. It's its own French style. And then, of course, the fleur de lis, which is a major French symbol, which you'll definitely need to know. This is a very kooky video about how they got all the mirrors. It's under 2 minutes. I didn't write it here, but it is required. It's kooky anyway, but she does have some good information. It will take you very little time. This is a not required video, just atmospheric and views, and you get a good sense of what it looks like, but it is not required. It's only under 2 minutes. This is also not required. It's about 3 minutes, kind of shows you kind of emphasis on ritual and dressing nobility, which was a big deal if you already read the Khan Academy, the dressing of the royalty. And then, of course, the gardens. The gardens are a big deal. So it's not just that Louis has control over the asserting his power through the building itself, but he has power over nature. And look how this garden is manicured. This is incredibly precise, right? The garden is filled with fountains that are gilded, that look gold, right? Gilded in bronze, so they look gold. References to Louis as the Sun King all over the place. Remember that quote from the article, I am the state, right? Really, he's associating himself with a kind of god, and he is in charge of everything. But I want you to look at the absolute emphasis on control over nature, and think about how you would describe the shapes that you're seeing here and the straight lines. And it's obviously very geometric in design. I mentioned the fleur de lis. So the gardens also have fleur de lis all over the place, which of course are symbols of the French royalty. Fleur de lis, in case you don't know how to spell it. Right. And the final video is an information about the gardens. It's about 5.5 minutes. It is required. That is all I have for you guys. Thank you very much.